This is a world remade, a planet not our own, yet intimately familiar. During the Jurassic, the Earth's atmosphere was a dense thermal blanket, rich with carbon dioxide. A relentless greenhouse effect pushed the global average temperature some 8 to 10 degrees higher than our own. From pole to pole, the great ice caps had vanished, surrendering their frozen water to the sea. The world ocean was a swollen, dominant force, claiming vast territories of what is now dry land, its surface lying a staggering 170 meters above modern levels. Imagine this primordial sea. It stretches to every horizon, a seamless expanse unbroken by a single shard of ice. The water itself possesses a strange and alien hue, a deep, brooding blue that bleeds into violet in the shallows, yet becomes utterly opaque in the open ocean. Its surface, even in the middle latitudes, is a bath, simmering at 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. It is a world teeming, saturated with a humid warmth and pulsing with life. But for a human traveler, it would be an exquisitely lethal paradise. To be cast adrift in this Jurassic ocean would be to experience an immediate, unsettling strangeness. The very water would feel wrong. Its chemistry was fundamentally different, a solution lower in sulfates but significantly richer in magnesium and calcium. It would possess a silken, heavy quality against the skin, a subtle yet profound variance that dictated the course of evolution for everything that lived within it. Scientists refer to this as a calcite sea, a chemical state that wrote the very rules of existence, determining which creatures could build their shells and skeletons and which could not. But the true danger was not confined to the deep. It was in the very air one might breathe. The atmosphere held around 26% oxygen, a few points higher than today. This might seem a benefit, a promise of easier breath, but it was a treacherous gift. This oxygen-rich air, combined with the planet's heat, created a volatile, fire-prone environment. A breath, if taken, would feel sharp, almost corrosive in the lung. Worse still was the invisible poison. Carbon dioxide levels were 4 to 8 times higher than in the modern era, hovering near 2,000 parts per million. For the human body, this is the threshold of hypercapnia. It begins with a headache, a creeping disorientation. Then, the heart begins to race as the blood acidifies. Within hours, consciousness would falter and then fail completely. It is a profound reminder that the world has belonged to many forms of life and that our own existence is balanced on the knife edge of a chemistry unique to our fleeting moment in time. The Jurassic Ocean was an alien world, governed not only by a different chemistry, but by an invisible architecture, hermoclines, unseen cliffs where temperature plummeted. In the sun-drenched tropical and subtropical zones, the surface might simmer at a balmy 30 degrees Celsius. Yet, a mere 200 meters below, in the encroaching twilight, the water would plunge to a frigid 8 or 10 degrees. This sheer thermal cliff did not create a barrier, it forged an engine. It drove powerful, swirling convection currents and gave birth to localized upwellings, colossal plumes of deep, cold water surging toward the light. These upwellings were the nutrient broth of the Jurassic. From the abyssal floor, they dredged a feast of phosphates and iron nitrates, the fundamental ingredients needed to ignite an explosion of plankton. Where these cold, rich currents met the warm surface, the ocean did not just teem with life, it boiled with it. This verdant bloom was the foundation of a brutal and magnificent food chain. It nourished swarms of zooplankton, which in turn fed shoals of small fish. And through these cascading layers of consumption, this energy flowed upward, ultimately fueling the titanic marine reptiles that ruled these waters. The upwelling zones were the planet's great biological capitals, but they were also its most perilous killing fields. Here, the concentration of predators reached its zenith. For any hypothetical human observer, to drift into one of these zones would be to enter the heart of the abattoir. Patrolling these fertile hunting grounds were the plesiosaurs. Their bodies, some stretching beyond 12 meters, were perfectly engineered for ambush in the upper layers of the water column. Their power lay in their devastating jaws, armed with long, conical teeth, each one slightly curved backward, a design specialized for seizing slippery, struggling fish, but lethally effective against any flesh that was soft and undefended. An encounter with such a creature in its element would not be a struggle. It would be an instantaneous, violent conclusion. Yet, the plesiosaurs were far from the most terrifying inhabitants of these ancient seas. The ichthyosaurs, despite the terror, lay not in their size, but in their gaze. Their eyes were the largest of any vertebrate of the era, some measuring up to 25 centimeters in diameter. This was no simple anatomical curiosity. It was a key to their dominance, granting them exceptionally acute vision in the low-light conditions of the deeper hunting grounds. To be stalked by an ichthyosaur was to be pursued by a predator that could see you long before you could ever be aware of its silent, streamlined approach. The dangers were not only biological. The very physics of this world were hostile. While the Tethys Sea, the shallow tropical ocean forming between the separating landmasses of Laurasia and Gondwana, was relatively forgiving, the vast Panthalassa Ocean that consumed most of the Western Hemisphere held depths of up to 10 kilometers. Down there, in the crushing blackness, the water pressure exceeded 1,000 atmospheres. This is not an abstract number. It is a physical law of annihilation, a force that seeks out every pocket of air within a foreign body, the lungs, the sinuses, the eardrums, and extinguishes it. For 56 million years, from the dawn of the period 201 million years ago, this world of giants and crushing depths thrived. As the supercontinent of Pangaea fractured, its rifting did not just move land, it created the very arenas for this epic of life and death. It is a humbling reminder that our own era is but a fleeting chapter, and that the Earth's most profound and violent stories are written in stone and water, in ecosystems that flourished and vanished, utterly indifferent to a future they could never conceive. A slow, inexorable grinding of continents was birthing an ocean. As land masses fractured and drifted, they stretched the crust thin, creating vast, shallow continental shelves on a scale the planet had never witnessed. These were not barren plains of sand, but immense, sun-drenched nurseries for life, the warm, teeming waters of the Jurassic Tethys Sea. To imagine these lost seas is to picture our modern tropical reefs, then magnify their scale and intensity 100-fold. Here, entire mountain ranges of coral clawed their way toward the light, building reef systems that would rival the Great Barrier Reef of today. The seafloor was not merely populated, it was suffocated with life. Dense, swaying forests of sea lilies shared the substrate with impenetrable carpets of brachiopods and bivalves, their shells forming a living pavement that stretched for countless leagues. And gliding through these hyper-real ecosystems were the ammonites. They were the true icons of the Mesozoic seas. Molluscan architects encased in spiraling shells of breathtaking complexity. Their diversity was explosive. In the Jurassic period alone, more than 1,000 recorded species patrolled these waters. Their coiled shells were masterpieces of evolutionary design, with forms that were almost limitless, from the classic tightly wound spiral to nearly straight conical tubes, from flattened discs that sliced through the water to heavy, almost stupors. Others were polished smooth. In the grandest of their kind, the shell alone could span 2 meters across. They conquered every available niche, from the turbulent coastal shallows to the silent, open ocean. Yet for all their abundance, they remain profound enigmas. Only their shells have survived the passage of eons. The soft, living creature within, its biology and its behaviors, has vanished completely, leaving us with beautiful fossils that pose more questions than they answer. They were not alone. Hunting in swift, aggressive shoals were the belemnites, ancient relatives of calcite, that acted as a counterbalance and point of muscle attachment. These were not passive drifters. They were torpedoes of flesh and fury, active predators that swarmed through the reefs and open water. Their fossilized rostrums are so durable so numerous that in certain geological strata they can be found by the millions, a testament to their staggering numbers. Their prevalence is also recorded in the bellies of their hunters. The fossilized stomach contents of the great marine reptiles, the ichthyosaurs, are frequently packed with hundreds of these indigestible belemnite rostrums, the last meal of a predator, preserved for eternity. This was an ocean where existence was a constant struggle, where predation was not an event, but the very rhythm of life itself. The engine for this entire world was the sun. In the upper layer of the ocean, from the shimmering surface down to 200 meters, lay the photic zone. This was the realm where sunlight could still penetrate, fueling the microscopic architects of the marine food web, the phytoplankton. But the planktonic communities of the Jurassic were a different breed from our own. Great dynasties of dinoflagellates and coccolithophores were just beginning their triumphant reign, blooming in unimaginable numbers. This immense biological productivity came at a cost. There, a rich, murky soup, thick with suspended organic matter. Massive plankton blooms would have stained the surface for thousands of square kilometers, turning the ocean shades of green, brown, or even a foreboding red. In these waters, visibility would have been drastically reduced, perhaps to only a few meters. This single fact shaped the lives of every creature. For the hunted, it meant danger could materialize from the gloom at any moment. For the hunter, it was the perfect veil. A predator could approach its quarry almost unseen, a shadowy form resolving into teeth and jaws in the blink of an eye. In these clouded waters, creatures around, it was a world of profound richness and terrifying immediacy, an intricate web of life built on a foundation of microscopic organisms and culminating in reptilian titans. An entire planetary ecosystem, teeming, breathing, and fighting, whose vibrant pulse is now felt only in the cold silence of stone. Beneath the shimmering surface of the Jurassic Ocean, a world of perpetual conflict churned. Here, life and death were bound in an intricate dance, choreographed by creatures that were vital components of a lethal ecosystem. Among them was Metriorhynchus, a name for a lineage of marine crocodiles that had severed their ties to the land completely. Evolution had remade them for the sea. Their limbs, once built for walking, had flattened and streamlined into efficient flippers. Their tails had shed their terrestrial form, erupting into a powerful vertical fluke, a near-perfect echo of a fish's tail. Reaching lengths of 3 to 4 meters, they were swift, agile hunters, weaving through the water with predatory grace, their jaws snapping shut on fish and unwary invertebrates. To a human adrift in these waters, they would have presented a dire threat. Perhaps not the colossal terror of the great pliosaurs, but a danger no less real, a swift and final encounter. But there is one name that commands a unique and chilling reverence: Liopleurodon. This colossal pliosaur reigned over the seas of Europe some 160 million years ago. Estimates of its size vary, placing it somewhere between 6 and 12 meters from snout to tail. Its head alone was a weapon of incredible scale, accounting for nearly a quarter of its entire body length. Within its jaws were meeting to seize and hold prey weighing hundreds of kilograms. Liopleurodon was the undisputed apex, a sovereign of the depths for whom there were no natural enemies. Paleontologists calculate that its bite was among the most powerful in the history of life on Earth. The muscles that powered its lower jaw were immense, filling a vast portion of its formidable skull. The pressure it could exert is estimated to have exceeded 100,000 newtons, a force several times greater than that of a modern great white shark. Its victims' bones were not merely broken, they were pulverized, shattered into fragments by an act of biological violence. For any human to come into contact with those jaws would mean an instantaneous and absolute annihilation. Yet the terrifying scale of Liopleurodon is somehow diminished by the knowledge of its kin. In the subsequent Cretaceous period, Pliosaurus funki, the beast known as Predator X, would patrol the oceans, a creature stretching up to 15 meters. But the Jurassic had its own titans, predecessors no less imposing. These animals were not ambush hunters. They had no need for stealth or cunning. They were beings of pure power, built to attack any chosen prey directly, head-on. Their attack velocity could exceed 30 kilometers per hour, a burst of speed that would leave even the most accomplished human swimmer hopelessly behind. There is a pervasive error in our perception of the prehistoric world, a tendency to imagine these ancient beings as slow, lumbering, and clumsy. The reality was far more dynamic. Consider the ichthyosaurs, their bodies a breathtaking example of convergent evolution. Physiologically, they were the dolphins of their day, capable of achieving comparable speeds, bursting through the water at up to 40 kilometers per hour. They hunted not by ambush, but by relentless, high-speed pursuit. To be targeted by such a hunter was to be condemned. There was no escape, only the terrifying inevitability of the chase. And patrolling these same waters were the ancestors of today's most feared marine predators. The great sharks were already ancient. Hybidus, a widespread carnivore, grew to 2.5 meters. It was an opportunist, its teeth adapted to both slicing fish and crushing the hard shells of invertebrates. Another, Paleospinax, was smaller but a more specialized hunter. These were the early drafts of the modern shark, and it is all but certain they possessed the same territorial aggression, the same chilling efficiency in the presence of prey. The Jurassic Ocean was a place of profound and constant sound, not of silence, but of a symphony of survival. It was the percussive crack of a predator's jaws, the rush of displaced water from a 15-meter body in motion, and the silent, desperate pulse of a heart about to be stilled. It was a world utterly alien to our own, a realm where the rules were simpler and infinitely more brutal. To exist here was to be either the hunter or the hunted, in a timeless, unforgiving theater of life and death. The ancient seas were not silent. They were alive with a symphony of sound, a language of pressure and vibration, utterly alien to the modern ear. In the depths of the Jurassic grew frequency tremors, subsonic pulses propagating through the water, felt more than heard. This was a planet-wide orchestra of the deep, where the constant chitinous clicking of countless ammonites and the ghostly jetting of belemnites formed a ceaseless bioacoustic hum. In the great upwelling zones, where currents brought nutrients from the abyss, the noise of feeding swarms would have been deafening, a chaotic roar of life and death on a scale we can no longer imagine. For a human cast adrift in this world, 150 million years before our time, the true horror would not be visual, but auditory. It would be the experience of hearing those distant, powerful vibrations thrumming through your very bones, sounds with no analog, no reference point in our catalog of terrestrial experience, signaling the approach of something immense, ancient, and utterly indifferent. The surface might have felt deceptively familiar. In the tropical latitudes, the water temperature hovered at a pleasant 28 degrees Celsius, an inviting warmth. But this comfort was a razor-thin illusion, a fragile membrane between two separate and lethal realities. Below, the thermal cliff was steep and unforgiving. At a depth of just 100 meters, the temperature would plummet to a chilling 12 to 15 degrees. Descend to 300 meters, and the water would be a mere 4 to 6 degrees, a frigid darkness that would steal the body's heat faster than it could ever be produced. For a person without the protection of modern technology, it would mean a slow, inexorable slide into hypothermia, a creeping cold that clouds the mind, stills the limbs, and ultimately extinguishes the spark of life. But the cold is a slow executioner. A far more immediate and absolute barrier guards the abyss, the crushing physical reality of pressure. An expert freediver today might reach 30 or 40 meters. At that depth, under 4 atmospheres of pressure, the weight of the water above compresses the air in the lungs to 1/4 of its normal volume. It is a profound and dangerous squeeze. But at 100 meters, the pressure is 11 atmospheres. The lungs, with their delicate architecture, would be completely collapsed. Further descent is a physical impossibility. There is no air left to sustain life, no internal strength to resist a force that is literally squeezing the body into submission. even if one were to remain upon that warm, inviting surface, another invisible threat rained down from above. The sun's radiation in the Jurassic was significantly more intense. The planet was shielded by an ozone layer, but it was a younger, more volatile version of our own, its structure and concentration different. Harmful ultraviolet radiation bathed the surface of the Paleontologic Ocean in quantities our biology is simply not equipped to handle. Unprotected skin, exposed to the open sea and sky, would be seared by a catastrophic sunburn within the first few hours. The creatures of this world had evolved their own defenses, pigmented chromatophores, and complex biochemical shields. Humanity, a creature of a far distant future, would possess no such protection. And then there were the currents. The world's continents were adrift in a different configuration, and the circulation of its carved paths across the open water. Where these immense flows of energy collided, the sea became a zone of violent chaos, upwellings, convergences, and vast whirlpools capable of swallowing vessels that did not yet exist. To be caught in such a gyre would be absolute. The strength of the finest human swimmer would be a meaningless gesture against the inexorable pull of a planet's oceanic engine. The waves themselves, driven by wind and storm, would have been a familiar terror, magnified. Storm waves of 10 to 15 meters, walls of water the height of a multi-story building, were a normal occurrence in the open ocean. And the tides, the very breath of the sea, were stronger. The moon, our constant companion, hung closer in the sky then, its gravitational pull more insistent, raising tidal waves of greater height and power. To face such forces without a vessel, without a foothold, is a challenge with no solution. To float in that ocean is to understand a profound truth. This ancient world was not hostile, it was merely complete without us. Every element, the sound, the pressure, the light, the very movement of the water, functioned according to a logic in which we had no part. It was a system perfectly balanced for the leviathans that swam its depths, but utterly unforgiving to the fragile biology of a creature yet to be born. We are an anomaly of the present, and in the deep past, we would find not an adventure, but a swift and humbling reminder that the universe does not wait for us. It simply is. Beyond the visible predators, an unseen dominion of killers saturated the waters. The Jurassic Ocean was a simmering cauldron of bacteria, viruses, and protozoa, a biological lexicon for which the modern human immune system would have no translation. Our defenses are a library of ancestral conflicts, meticulously catalogued over millions of years of coevolution with Earth-specific pathogens. Thrust into this alien microbial soup, we would be utterly defenseless. A simple scratch could invite a fatal infection from a bacterium considered harmless in its own time, triggering a catastrophic septic shock in an unprepared system. This microscopic peril was mirrored by a planetary upheaval. The world's engine was running hot. Submarine volcanoes erupted with a fury far exceeding that of the modern era, as the planet's very crust was in a state of violent becoming. The supercontinent of Pangaea was groaning under immense strain, tearing itself apart and forging new zones of seafloor spreading. Along these nascent mid-ocean ridges, where magma bled from the mantle to form fresh crust, the seafloor was pierced by abyssal furnaces, hydrothermal vents, the legendary black smokers. They were chimneys into the planet's core, belching plumes of water heated to an astonishing 400 degrees Celsius, a superheated cocktail of dissolved metals and sulfides, instantly lethal to nearly any life we know. Yet here, in this seemingly hellish landscape, life did not just survive, it thrived. These were islands of bizarre, extremophilic biology, entire ecosystems built in defiance of the sun. Their existence was powered not by light, but by chemosynthesis, a profound alchemy that drew energy from the oxidation of hydrogen sulfide erupting from the vents. Giant, blood-red tubeworms, spectral mollusks, and mats of specialized bacteria formed dense, pulsing communities, a symphony of life forged in darkness and poison. A human body within tens of meters would be boiled alive. But even far from these volcanic hotspots, the Jurassic Deep was fundamentally different. Isotopic analysis of fossil carbonates reveals a startling truth. The bottom waters of the ancient ocean were not frigid. Instead of hovering near freezing at 2 or 3 minutes, this warmth fueled a deep-sea metabolism on an epic scale, suggesting an abyssal fauna that was richer, more diverse, and far more active than its modern descendants. And here the story plunges into darkness. For in these profound depths lived creatures of which we have almost no record. The tyranny of geology dictates that soft-bodied organisms, the ancestors of squid, octopuses, and jellyfish, rarely endure. Flesh and cartilage dissolve back into the elements, leaving no epitaph in stone. We are left to wonder about a ghost lineage of soft-bodied leviathans, forever lost to time. Only under the most exceptional circumstance, stagnant lagoon, its fine-grained muds and oxygen-starved bottom waters created a silent tomb that cradled the dead with exquisite care, preserving the delicate and the ephemeral. Each fossil is a single word from a lost epic. From these fragments, we struggle to reconstruct a world not just of different creatures, but of different rules. A world whose deepest secrets were written in water and flesh, and have long since washed away. In the fine-grained limestone of ancient lagoons, a creature was unearthed that would forever blur the lines between reptile and bird. This was the resting place of Archaeopteryx, the feathered pioneer, long considered the first true avian to grace the skies. But this fossilized icon was not alone in its stone tomb. It was found amidst an entire ecosystem, a silent assembly of marine reptiles, armored fish, crustaceans, and the ghostly outlines of jellyfish. In life, each of these organisms would have presented a mortal danger, a testament to the brutal reality of their time. The fish of the Jurassic seas deserve their own chapter in this deep history. They were built upon a more ancient blueprint than the vast majority of species that swim in our modern oceans. The teleosts, or bony fish, today the most numerous group of all vertebrates, were only just beginning their evolutionary ascent. The waters were instead dominated by more primitive lineages of ray-finned fish. Among them was Lepidotes, a formidable creature reaching a full meter in length. It was covered not in the flexible scales of a modern fish, but in an armor of glistening, rhombic enamel. Its jaws were not for slicing, but for crushing, so animal would have resulted in a deep, painful, bone-breaking bite. Still haunting these early Jurassic waters were the acanthodians, the so-called spiny sharks. They were ghosts from an even deeper past, a lineage that had witnessed the dawn of jawed vertebrates. Though their time was coming to an end, with extinction awaiting them by the period's close, they were still a part of this alien seascape. These were smaller fish, also coated in tiny, diamond-shaped scales, but distinguished by the formidable rows of sharp spines that stood erect before their fins. To a human observer, they would pose no immediate threat. Yet their very presence, a living relic from the Paleozoic, would be a chilling reminder that these were not our waters. This was a world long extinct, operating by rules we could never fully comprehend. And no survey of the Jurassic seas is complete without considering the turtles. Yet, in the strictest sense, the great marine turtles we know today had not yet claimed the seas. Their dynasty would begin in the succeeding Cretaceous period. In the Jurassic, their ancestors were taking their first tentative strokes into the open ocean. These were semi-aquatic reptiles, their bodies still transitioning from land to sea. Descendants of more pliable than the bony fortresses of their descendants, offering scant protection against the crushing jaws of the era's apex predator. The coastal zones held their own mysteries, ecological niches filled by creatures with no modern equivalent. Today, the warm, shallow waters are home to gentle manatees and dugongs, the marine grazers. But who filled this role 150 million years ago? Some paleontologists now theorize that certain plesiosaurs, long-necked marine reptiles typically imagined as fish hunters, may have specialized in a different diet. They may have been the sea cows of their time, using their long necks to browse on meadows of algae and sift through the sediment for soft-bodied invertebrates. The truth of their lifestyle remains a subject of intense scientific scrutiny, a whisper in the stone. But the greatest dangers are often those unseen. The fossil record, biased towards bone and shell, barely hints at the gelatinous multitudes that pulsed through the water column. The jellyfish of the Jurassic. We see them only as faint, ethereal stains on the stone, the delicate impressions of their bells and tentacles. They resembled modern forms, but belonged to entirely different, extinct species, and many were undoubtedly toxic. Each tear of flesh and blood, to drift into this unseen veil, would be to invite an agony delivered without warning. Even the ancestors of modern octopuses and squid navigated these depths, their early forms still evolving into the intelligent, adaptable hunters we know today. The stone tells a story not just of individual lives, but of an entire biosphere, captured in a moment of geological time. It is a complete world, sealed away, where the air was different, the continents were in motion, and the very rules of survival were being rewritten. Each fossil is a letter from a time when the planet was alien to us, a humbling testament to the worlds that rise and fall, leaving behind only echoes and riddles, waiting in the silence of the rock. They belong to the great clan of the Coleoidea, cephalopods, whose skeletons had retreated inside their bodies, a secret architecture of shell hidden within soft, mutable flesh. Their cousins, the bullet-shaped belemnites, were ghosts in these waters, but they were not alone. More delicate forms, the true ancestors of modern squid and cuttlefish, also haunted the Juras encounter between one of these beings and a human diver would have been a moment of mutual, primal shock, a meeting of two alien intelligences in the silent depths. The heart of this ancient ocean, however, beat within its sprawling reef systems. But these were not the reefs we know today. The vibrant cities of the modern sea are built by the scleractinians, the six-rayed corals. They rose to prominence in the Triassic, filling the void left by the Great Permian extinction, the most profound catastrophe in the history of life. By the Jurassic, their intricate calcium carbonate colonies formed vast, sprawling structures. Yet, they were not the sole architects. Alongside them, other, stranger organisms cemented the foundations of this world. Rudous bivalves, bizarre mollusks that go several meters in height, created silicious cathedrals, filtering the water through their porous walls. The result was a reef of an unfamiliar and profoundly alien design. To walk upon the floor of a Jurassic reef would be to journey into a completely separate reality. Structures reminiscent of modern corals would be interspersed with these towering spires of sponge, creating a landscape of impossible shapes and shadows. Gliding between them, we would find creatures that have no true analog in our own fauna. The familiar forms of sea urchins, starfish, and the brittle stars known as ophiuroids would be easily recognizable, echoes of a shared, deep ancestry. But beside them lived the blastoidea, echinoderms when the current. They are an entire branch of life's tree, now utterly vanished. The benthic life of the Jurassic shelves was distinguished by another profound difference: the exceptional abundance of brachiopods. These shelled organisms, outwardly resembling bivalve mollusks, but fundamentally distinct in their anatomy, covered the seafloor in dense, living carpets. Today, brachiopods are relics, a few hundred species clinging to existence in the cold, deep zones of the ocean. But in the Jurassic, they were legion. Thousands of species thrived in the warm shallows, forming a dominant kingdom of sessile, filter-feeding animals. Where the brachiopod forests gave way to open plains, the vast, muddy bottom of the Jurassic seas held its own secrets. This was no sterile wasteland. It was a living, breathing substrate, riddled with the burrows of countless animals. Polychaete worms, unseen engineers, drove entire irrigation systems through the sediment, their tunnels oxygenating the anoxic mud. Brittle stars, the fragile ophiuroids, slithered across the surface with their serpentine arms, sifting for organic particles. Small crustaceans excavated temporary shelters, their lives a constant cycle of digging and hiding. The entire seabed was in motion, a slow, churning engine processing the detritus of the world above. To set foot here would be to sink, knee-deep, into a liquid slurry of life and decay, disturbing entire hidden communities with every step. And from this rich organic sediment, another, more insidious threat arose. In the oxygen-starved conditions, the ceaseless decomposition of organic matter produced hydrogen sulfide. It is a gas with the telltale scent of rotten eggs, but its odor belies its nature as a potent neurotoxin, lethal even in small concentrations. In the still, bottom waters of isolated marine basins, cut off from the ocean's great circulation, this poison could accumulate. Here, the water itself became a deadly trap, a silent, invisible barrier between the vibrant world above and a toxic abyss below. These were not alien worlds on distant stars, but forgotten chapters of our own planet's story, buried deep beneath our feet, a silent reminder that the Earth we inhabit is but a fleeting moment in a much deeper, stranger, and more unforgiving history. The placid surface of a Jurassic sea was a profound deception. Beneath the shimmer of an alien sun, the water column was often a trap, stratified into layers of life and death. When a storm, a force of pure physics, churned these layers, the consequences were catastrophic. Lethal gases, imprisoned in the oxygen-starved depths, would erupt towards the surface, creating vast, spreading zones of instant death. For some of the great Jurassic oceans, this was not a temporary state, it was a permanent condition. The inland basins of the ancient Tethys Sea, with their restricted circulation, became drowned graveyards. Here, the deep water was perpetually anoxic, a chemical tomb where the cycle of decay was arrested. Organic matter, the remnants of plankton and fallen behemoths, did not decompose. Instead, it was preserved, accumulating over millennia in thick, dark layers, the very source of the rich petroleum deposits our modern world now consumes. This ancient process of preservation carried a terrible price. To descend below a certain depth in such a basin was to cross an invisible threshold, a boundary known as the chemocline. It was the equivalent of stepping into a poisoned chamber. Above it, life teemed in the sunlit waters. Below it, there was only a sterile, toxic brine. Not even a fish would dare to cross that line, an unseen wall separating the breathable world from the suffocating abyss. These anoxic zones were far more extensive than any we know today. Throughout the Mesozoic era, the planet witnessed several cataclysmic episodes known as oceanic anoxic events. During these periods, huge swaths of the global ocean were stripped of their oxygen, triggering mass extinctions that repeatedly reset the course of marine evolution. For an unprotected human, entering water with a dissolved oxygen concentration below just 2 milligrams per liter would mean swim. The physics of light, at least, has remained constant. Then, as now, the sun's rays began their journey into the deep. The long, warm wavelengths of reds and oranges were the first to be extinguished, absorbed entirely within the upper 50 meters. By a depth of 20 meters, the world was already cast in an ethereal blue-green twilight. At 100 meters, only the faintest ghosts of light remained, a descent into near-total darkness. And at 200 meters, the reign of absolute, eternal blackness began. In this, nothing has changed. But the inhabitants of that darkness were creatures of another world entirely. The twilight zone, stretching from 100 to 1,000 meters deep, was populated by a phantasmagoria of life forms with predatory adaptations and bioluminescent strategies we can only guess at. The ability to produce living light is an ancient art, and it was almost certainly as widespread in the Jurassic seas as it is today. Bacteria, dinoflagellates, jellyfish, squid, and fish all would have possessed this ghostly power. On a moonless night, the surface of the Jurassic Ocean, disturbed by the wind, would have shimmered with a silent, living constellation. Every wave crest would have been traced in faint, glowing light, a spectacle of mesmerizing beauty. But this beauty was a warning. It was the glow of a world that was lethally dangerous. As darkness fell, the ocean did not sleep. It awoke. Many of the great marine reptiles were masters of the night and the twilight hours. Their enormous eyes, armed with pupils that could dilate to drink in the last photons of starlight, were perfectly adapted for hut at the surface, and in their wake came the entire food chain. The nocturnal surface was a frantic, teeming banquet, the time of maximum predatory activity. A human, adrift in that water, would be a helpless silhouette against the glowing plankton, an irresistible target for the silent hunters rising from below. And woven into this tapestry of chemical and biological threats was a danger that transcends all geological eras: the raw, physical power of the ocean itself. Rogue waves, those anomalous, impossibly tall mountains of water that rise from the open sea without warning, are not a product of time. They are a product of fluid dynamics. They existed then as they do now. The Jurassic Ocean was not merely a different time, it was a different planet, operating under a lethal set of rules. Its depths held poisons we cannot imagine, and its darkness was lit by the ghostly lanterns of creatures we will never know. It was a world of profound hostility, a reminder that the ocean has always been its own kingdom, governed by forces that are utterly indifferent to the fragile life that dares to enter its domain. The Jurassic Ocean was a realm of deceptive calm. Upon its glassy surface, a wave could erupt without warning, a liquid cliff rising 20 to 30 meters from the featureless plain of water. For any small vessel, for any living thing caught swimming in the open sea, it was an immediate and absolute catastrophe. These rogue waves, born of complex and still mysterious interactions, were as real 150 million years ago as they are today. But these spontaneous furies were dwarfed by a more profound and predictable menace: the tsunami. In the Jurassic, the planet's crust was in a state of violent adolescence. Active volcanism and relentless tectonic grinding meant that underwater earthquakes and colossal landslides were not rare calamities, but a constant, rhythmic feature of the world. When an immense, unstable mass of sediment gave way on the continental slope, it unleashed a pulse of energy through the water. In the deep ocean, this wave was a ghost, a swift but almost imperceptible swelling. But as it raced towards the shallows, its energy compressed, and it would rear up into a wall of water of staggering height. Such events were terrifyingly common near the young rift zones, the unhealed wounds on the seafloor where continents were being torn asunder. Nowhere was the danger more acute than around the volcanic islands that peppered the Jurassic seas. These were not the ancient, stable land masses of our time, but fresh, fragile, and volatile accumulations of ash and lava. When the flank of such an island catastrophically failed, collapsing into the sea, it triggered a mega tsunami of unimaginable scale, a wave capable of scouring entire coastlines clean of life. The aftermath was just as deadly. Volcanic tephra, a fine ash, would rain down from the sky, blanketing thousands of square kilometers of ocean. This ash, rich in iron and other minerals, was a fatal fertilizer. It triggered an explosive, frenzied bloom of phytoplankton. But this sudden flush of life was fleeting. As the plankton died and sank, their decomposition consumed all the oxygen in the water, creating vast, suffocating zones of anoxia, regions of death that could persist for years, altering the very chemistry of the sea. To truly comprehend this lost world, one must imagine not only its creatures, but the unforgiving physics that governed it. For a hypothetical human visitor, the most insidious enemy would not be a predator, but the water itself. With every 10 meters of descent, the pressure increases by 1 atmosphere. At a depth of just 30 meters, the diver is subjected to 4 atmospheres, the weight of 4 skies pressing. Here, the air in the lungs is compressed, and a silent, treacherous process begins. Nitrogen, inert at the surface, is forced from the lungs and dissolves into the bloodstream. If that diver were to ascend too quickly, the pressure would release, and the dissolved nitrogen would violently fizz out of solution, forming microscopic bubbles in the veins and arteries. This is decompression sickness, the bends, an agony that can cripple and kill within minutes. And there is another demon in the deep: nitrogen narcosis. At 30 meters, the gas begins to affect the brain, inducing a state similar to mild intoxication. At 50 meters, judgment becomes dangerously impaired. By 80 meters, it can trigger vivid hallucinations and a complete loss of orientation. The rapture of the deep, a siren's call to oblivion. The great marine reptiles of the Jurassic, of course, were immune. They did not breathe compressed gas from a tank. Yet the physical laws that would torment a human interloper were the same laws that shaped their existence. Below 300 meters, the pressure exceeds 30 atmospheres, and the temperature never rises above a chilling 8 degrees Celsius. This is the mesopelagic, the twilight zone. Sunlight cannot penetrate this deep. In our modern oceans, this realm is populated by creatures of nightmare and wonder, lanternfish and bristlemouths, with enormous eyes and bioluminescent organs that paint the darkness with cold light. The Jurassic Twilight Zone was also inhabited, but by a completely different cast of beings, phantoms we can now only imagine. Deeper still, beyond 2,000 meters, lies the aphotic zone, the kingdom of absolute and eternal night. Here, the pressure is a crushing force, and life exists in a state of perpetual darkness, sustained by a faint rain of nutrients from the world above. The Jurassic Ocean was not merely a backdrop for monsters, it was a physical entity of immense power, a world of sudden violence and suffocating pressure. The true master of this domain was not the largest predator, but the crushing, indifferent physics of the deep. The pressure here exceeds 200 atmospheres. For an unprotected human, there is not a single chance of survival. The body, a vessel designed for a gentle envelope of air, would be annihilated in a fraction of a second. A submersible crafted from modern materials might withstand the immense weight of the water column, but the soft tissue within would be instantly and catastrophically compromised. Down in these abyssal plains, organisms of the Jurassic period thrive in conditions we are still struggling to comprehend. Their entire existence depended upon a slow, constant rain of organic particles descending from the sunlit layers miles above. This phenomenon is known as marine snow, a perpetual, silent blizzard of detritus. It is a cascade of ghosts, the microscopic remains of deceased plankton, the fecal pellets of zooplankton, and aggregates of mucus that bind these fragments together on their long journey down. During the Jurassic, this downward torrent of life was no less intense than it is today, and perhaps it was even richer. It was the sole provider for the deep-sea community, their only source of energy, delivering the gift of photosynthetic organics manufactured in a world of light they would never see. This unceasing snowfall of carbon is one of the planet's most crucial biogeochemical engines, locking away elements from the atmosphere for eons. Here, a kingdom of echinoderms had already achieved a remarkable diversity. Sea urchins, starfish, brittle stars, and sea cucumbers navigated the profound darkness. But it was the sea lilies, the crinoids, that defined vast stretches of this Hess. The Jurassic crinoids were ubiquitous, even in the shallows. Their long stalks carpeted the ocean floor, creating vast, undulating meadows. Their feathery arms formed intricate nets, woven from countless tiny tube feet, filtering the passing currents for any suspended particle of food. It was a meditative, beautiful, and profoundly alien spectacle. To witness a scene on a Jurassic reef, one would have to ascend into a different world entirely. The waters are bright, almost tropical, with visibility stretching 10 to 15 meters. The seafloor is a garden of unfamiliar forms. Geometric sponges and S, their arms swaying in unison. Between these living forests, the ghosts of the era glide past. Ammonites in their spiraled sheet, trolling the sunlit canopy of this ecosystem, are the marine crocodiles, the silent, ever-present threat. It was a world of both breathtaking beauty and immediate, lethal danger. The question of whether a human could find sustenance in these waters is an intriguing one. Technically, a fish is a fish. Were one to be caught, along complex. The microbial composition of these creatures' digestive systems was entirely different. They harbored parasites for which our immune systems have no defense, The soft tissues of many species could have contained a cocktail of unknown biotoxins. To consume the flesh of the Jurassic would be to play a game of biological roulette, with an entirely unpredictable and potentially fatal outcome. Yet, beyond the predators and the poisons, there was another, more colossal threat: the storms. The Jurassic atmosphere was a hothouse, hot, humid, and laden with energy, creating the perfect conditions for the formation of exceptionally powerful tropical cyclones. The warm surface of the Jurassic Ocean was a breeding ground for hurricanes of an intensity we can scarcely imagine, fueled by the stark temperature difference between the sea and the upper atmosphere. Some scientists theorize that Mesozoic hurricanes dwarfed their modern counterparts, unleashing a fury born from a hotter, more volatile planet. This lost world asks nothing of us. It does not seek our understanding, nor does it require our judgment. It simply was, a complete, intricate, and violent sphere of life, governed by its own unforgiving rules. It is a silent testament to a planet that lived and breathed and raged long before our arrival. A humbling reminder that the story of life is infinitely larger than our own chapter within it. The surface of the ocean becomes a churning maelstrom. Winds, screaming across the water at speeds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour, tear the very fabric of the sea into a seething chaos of foam and splintered life. After the hurricane passes, what remains is a testament to its fury. But this is merely the surface. Below the turmoil, in the deep, life resumes its ancient rhythm almost immediately. As the storm approaches, a profound instinctual wisdom guides the ocean's inhabitants. The great marine reptiles, sensing the catastrophic drop in pressure, descend into the crushing calm of the abyss, far from the violent agitation of the surface. Shoals of fish atomize, scattering into the vastness to weather the onslaught alone. And when the waves finally subside, they all return. Life in the Jurassic seas possessed a staggering resilience, operating within a logic entirely alien to our own. Here, in the shallows, lay one of its most peculiar creations, the carbonate platform. It was a vast, sun-drenched plain of limestone shelf, a brilliantly illuminated seabed of carbonate sand and nascent corals, stretching for leagues toward the open ocean. And then, it would simply cease to exist, plunging abruptly down a steep escarpment for hundreds of meters. This was the reef slope, a vertical frontier where two worlds collided. It was the meeting point of the shallow, sunlit ecosystem and the eternal darkness of the deep sea. Along this precipice, nutrient-rich upwellings spiraled upwards, and the era's most formidable predators patrolled the edge, hunting the boundary between light and shadow. Below 200 meters, sunlight is a forgotten memory. In this aphotic zone, the absolute dark is the hunter's only cloak. Ghostly coleoids, ancient relatives of the octopus and squid, stalked this perpetual night. They navigated not by sight, but by taste and touch, sensing the faint chemical trails and the minute pressure waves of their prey. Here, too, fish carried their own stars, photophores, organs of bioluminescence, blinking in the blackness. These creatures were part of the greatest migration on the planet, a colossal daily pilgrimage. By night, they ascended to the surface to feed. By day, they retreated back into the crushing twilight. This vertical migration created a titanic daily pulse of biomass, as billions of organisms moved in unison through the water column, a process that has never stopped. The ocean itself was not a uniform whole. It was a layered world, structured by invisible forces. Temperature gradients created strata of different densities: cold water, heavier than warm; saltier water, heavier than fresh. At the boundaries of these layers, unseen forces were at work. Slow, colossal undulations, known as internal waves, moved through the depths. Invisible from the surface, they transported heat and nutrients, mixed the layers, and created pockets of turbulence. A creature caught within one would feel an inexplicable pull, a strange and disorienting current, as if the water around it had come alive with a will of its own. The acoustics of this ancient ocean were a symphony of the planet itself. In our modern seas, the dominant sound is the thrum of human activity, but the Jurassic waters knew a different kind of noise. There was no whine of engines, no percussive ping of sonar. Instead, there was the persistent low-frequency hum from submarine volcanoes, a sound that could travel for thousands of kilometers. There was the sharp crackle of the growing reefs, and the deep grinding groan of tectonic plates shifting in their sleep. The great resonant calls of leviathans would one day fill these waters, but whales did not yet exist. The acoustic niche, however, was not empty. Other giants, the colossal, their nervous systems were perhaps tuned to receive. And the story does not end in the sunlit shallows or the twilight zone. Traces of life are found even at the greatest depths. In certain deep-sea Jurassic deposits, preserved in stone, are ghostly signatures. The faint trails of crawling things, burrows dug by creatures that have left no other record, furrows carved in the sediment by unknown organisms. They are whispers from the abyss, evidence of diverse communities thriving where no light has ever reached. They are a humbling reminder that the history of our world is written not only in bone, but in the silent pressure of the deep, in the forgotten sounds of a planet moving to rhythms entirely its own. Here, where the crushing weight of the ocean and an absolute darkness would render human existence instantly fatal, life did not merely endure, it reigned. In the Jurassic period, the sea was a realm of total saturation, a vibrant tapestry of existence woven from the sun-drenched surface to the lightless, eternal midnight of the abyssal floor. The sheer diversity of its ecological architecture was colossal. The open water, the pelagic realm, was a vertical kingdom, stratified into realms of diminishing light and escalating pressure. The epipelagic, the sunlit zone, was the stage for the most visible dramas. Below it lay the mesopelagic, verse with its own unique assembly of inhabitants, its own rules of survival. The seabed itself, the benthos, was no less complex, divided into the littoral, sublittoral, bathyal, and abyssal zones. Not one of these domains, from the tide-swept shores to the deepest trenches, was devoid of life, and not one would have offered a moment of safety to a human intruder. Yet, a ghost haunted these waters. An entire dynasty of life was conspicuously absent. The trilobites, those armored sovereigns of the Paleozoic seas, were gone. They were casualties of a cataclysm that predated the dinosaurs' rise, a planetary fever that had occurred some 252 million years before. The Great Permian Extinction was an apocalypse of unimaginable scale, a silent killer that scoured the oceans, extinguishing 96% of all marine species. It serves as a stark reminder that the world before us has unmade and remade itself time and again. The oceans before this great dying were a world even more alien than the one we see here. The Jurassic Sea, therefore, was not an ancient, stable ecosystem. It was a world reborn from ashes, a new world constructed by the few who survived. This ocean was a planet-sized laboratory, where the survivors of the apocalypse were now the architects of a new order. The Permian-Triassic extinction event left a profound scar on the structure of Jurassic communities. The old dynasties that had dominated the Paleozoic seas were shattered, their thrones left vacant. In their place, a new cast of characters seized the stage. Marine reptiles of unprecedented scale, new lineages of fish, and legions of invertebrates radiated into the ecological vacuum. This was a youthful, almost aggressive biological frontier, a system still finding its equilibrium, filling the vast, empty voids with ferocious innovation. And as this new life blossomed, the very ground beneath the oceans was in motion. The Jurassic period witnessed one of nature's most profound experiments, set in motion by the slow, inexorable sundering of the supercontinent Pangaea. This geological upheaval created isolated seas, each a crucible for its own evolutionary trajectory. The ancient Tethys Sea to the south, and the nascent Atlantic, a growing rift between the continents of Africa and North America, each basin became a distinct biological universe. The physical barriers between them were immense, rarely crossed. This geographic isolation forced life down parallel evolutionary paths. Similar roles in different oceans were filled by entirely different creatures, a testament to the convergent power of natural selection. The burgeoning Atlantic Ocean was then a mere sliver of its future self, a long, narrow seaway reminiscent of the modern Red Sea, but on a far grander scale. A shallow strait sometimes connected it to the vast Panthalassic Ocean, the precursor to the Pacific, through the frigid Arctic waters. The opening and closing of this gateway was not a gentle process. Each event triggered biotic crises and renaissances as faunas collided, competed, and reshaped the ecological landscape time and again. Along the coasts of this new ocean, the continental shelves were shallow, warm, and fantastically productive. Vast rivers, draining the dinosaur-dominated lands, poured immense quantities of nutrients into the sea, feeding zones of upwelling and creating the richest of fishing grounds. This nutrient bounty fueled sprawling coral reefs and lush coastal lagoons. Here, the two great Jurassic empires met. Dinosaurs, titans of the land, would approach the water's edge to drink, their colossal forms silhouetted against the ancient sun. While above, the leathery wings of pterosaurs cast fleeting shadows upon the waves, their sharp eyes scanning the surface for an unsuspecting fish. This was a world in constant, violent flux, a reminder that no ecosystem is permanent, no dynasty eternal. It is a portrait of a planet not as a static stage, but as a living, breathing entity, forever dismantling and rebuilding itself, long before our own arrival and long after our own stories have faded into the. It was a boundary between two worlds, an edge of air and water as productive as it was unpredictable. Here, above the vast Jurassic seas, the skies belonged to the pterosaurs. These were not dinosaurs, but a parallel dynasty of flying reptiles, and they claimed the ocean's surface as their sovereign hunting ground. Their skeletons, a marvel of evolutionary engineering, were composed of hollow, air-filled bones, a design for lightness and strength, which, by a quirk of fate, also made them exceptionally well-suited for preservation in the fine-grained sediments of the seabed. Among the most iconic of these aerial predators was Rhamphorhynchus. With a wingspan stretching to 1.5 meters, it was a creature of elegant and alien geometry. A long, rigid tail, tipped with a distinctive diamond-shaped vein, acted as a rudder, granting it superb stability in flight. It hunted with a terrifying grace, a technique known as skim feeding. Pitching down towards the waves, it would slice the water's surface with its elongated lower jaw, bristling with needle-sharp, forward-pointing teeth. Anything unfortunate enough to be in its path was snapped up in an instant. To witness a flock of these creatures would have been to see a sky filled with a cacophony of calls and the whir of leathered wings, a vision both swift and deeply unnerving. But these were far from the largest of their kind. The true titans of the Jurassic sky, precursors to even larger that of a small modern aircraft. These behemoths were true pelagic animals, masters of the open ocean. They harnessed the subtle power of oceanic updrafts, soaring effortlessly on air currents rising from the waves below. For weeks, perhaps even months on end, they could remain aloft, living, hunting, and sleeping on the wing, rarely needing to touch solid ground, descending with devastating precision. To see such a being pass just meters overhead would be an experience etched into memory, a spectacle of profound beauty and primal fear. Yet these masters of the air were bound to the sea below, an ocean that was not one monolithic entity, but a tapestry of distinct and varied realms, defined not just by depth, but by latitude. In the temperate zones, where the continents of Europe and North America now sit, the waters were warmer than our own. The fauna here was less overtly tropical than in the equatorial furnace of the Tethys Sea, but it was an ecosystem of staggering richness. It appears that certain lineages of plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs thrived in these cooler, more temperate waters. These were often different, more robust animals, adapted to an environment that was perhaps less bountiful than the tropics, but offered a greater, more predictable stability through the season. Further still from the equator, the polar regions of the Jurassic presented a world of stark contrasts. There were no permanent ice caps as we know them today, but the planet's axial tilt remained, and with it, the inescapable reality of the polar winter. For 6 long months, a profound darkness would descend. While the water temperature remained above freezing, the absence of sunlight brought the engine of life to a grinding halt. Photosynthesis ceased. The vast blooms of phytoplankton, the very foundation of the marine food web, vanished. The entire ecosystem simplified, contracting under the strain of starvation. And yet, fossil evidence suggests that some of the great marine reptiles did not flee. They endured, spending the entire winter in these dark, barren seas, a testament to their incredible physiological plasticity, waiting for the sun's return and the explosive bloom of life it would bring. This very resilience forces us to confront one of the most dynamic debates in paleontology: the inner workings of these ancient animals. What metabolic fire burned within the marine reptiles of the Jurassic? Were the Ichthyosaurs, those masters of speed and pursuit, truly warm-blooded? A growing body of evidence, including sophisticated isotopic analysis of their teeth, suggests that at least some of them were. They could maintain a core body temperature significantly higher than the surrounding water. If true, they were not sluggish reptiles, but the Mesozoic equivalent of modern tuna or swordfish, powerful predators driven by the high-octane furnace of endothermy. This would have granted them superior speed, greater stamina for prolonged hunts, and a capacity for far more aggressive, relentless predation. The plesiosaurs, by contrast, appear to have been more conventional ectotherms, relying on the ambient warmth of the water. They were ambush hunters, creatures of patience, their biology a world away from the perpetual motion of their ichthyosaur cousins. The bones, preserved in stone, tell us of their shape and size. But it is in these deeper clues, the subtle chemistry and the context of their global distribution, that we uncover the true nature of their existence. They were not simply monsters of a bygone age, but complex biological engines, whose internal fires we are only now beginning to comprehend. In the frigid depths of the Jurassic seas, a different kind of life held dominion. For the great marine reptiles, the cold water imposed a languid pace upon their existence, a stark contrast to the frenetic warmth of mammalian blood. But this slowness was a secret strength. It was the key to a profound metabolic economy, demanding significantly less food to sustain their colossal forms. These leviathans could endure immense periods of hunger, waiting patiently in the gloom between the rare, violent spectacles of a successful hunt. This was a strategy born of necessity, perfectly honed for an unpredictable world where the next meal was never guaranteed, a world of feast and famine stretching across geological time. A cold-blooded pliosaur, a behemoth of flesh and bone, could lie suspended and motionless for days, a cryptic shadow against the abyssal dark. To any passing creature, it would be all but invisible, a part of the static, deep-water landscape. It would remain so until the final, horrifying moment, when it erupted from the gloom in a maelstrom of teeth and fury, a lightning strike from a living mountain. The sensory world of these ancient predators was a tapestry of perceptions entirely alien to our own. Their senses were not merely sharp, they were concentrated, ruthlessly efficient instruments of death. The sharks that patrolled these same waters possessed electroreception, a ghostly ability to perceive the faint electrical fields generated by the muscle contractions of their prey. It is a near certainty that their Jurassic ancestors were armed with the same spectral sense. The great reptile ability to feel the world through infrasound, detecting the subtle pressure waves and vibrations of moving bodies through a sensitive lateral line. A human swimmer, displaced from time, would be a cacophony in this silent theater. Every heartbeat, every contracting muscle would generate a detectable electrical signature. Every movement would send out ripples of vibration, an acoustic announcement of presence. Long before the human eye could discern a threat in the murk, these ancient hunters would already be aware, their senses painting a vivid picture of this strange, soft-bodied intruder. Then there is the scent of blood. In the ocean, it is one of the most powerful and primal triggers for predatory behavior. Even a minor abrasion, a seemingly insignificant scratch on human skin, would release a plume of amino acids and hemoglobin into the current. This chemical trail, invisible to us, would travel for many hundreds of meters, an irresistible summons. Today's great white sharks can detect a single part of blood in a billion parts of water. There is no reason to believe the olfactory abilities of their Jurassic predecessors were any less acute. In the teeming waters of that ancient sea, the scent of any blood would not attract one hunter, but many, converging on the source from all directions. Beyond blood, there is the scent of fear itself. Under the influence of acute stress, the human body releases a cocktail of hormones and chemosignals into the water. Modern sharks and other marine predators are known to react specifically to the chemical signature of an animal in distress. Prey that has not evolved alongside a particular hunter lacks any form of biochemical camouflage for these signals of panic. A human, finding themselves for the first time in an ocean of ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, would experience a terror so profound it would become a beacon, literally broadcasting their vulnerability across the water. The capacity for these creatures to learn remains one of paleontology's great enigmas. Yet their living relatives, the crocodilians, demonstrate a clear ability for memory and association. Certain individuals have been observed to remember locations where prey is easy to come by. If the Jurassic sea dragons possessed similar cognitive faculties, the arrival of a neek, a fatal moment of discovery, that information could spread. Through associative learning, the image of this slow, defenseless swimmer would be logged, and subsequent encounters would become progressively and inevitably more dangerous. One must wonder how an animal that has never seen a primate, never seen a bipedal form, would react. Many wild creatures today respond to the utterly unfamiliar not with immediate aggression, but with a deep-seated curiosity. Perhaps the true terror lies not in the certainty of the attack, but in the ambiguity of that first meeting. A gaze across the eons, an ancient intelligence assessing a complete anomaly in its timeless domain, deciding whether this strange new shape is a threat, a curiosity, or simply food. In the deep, a modern diver might encounter a giant squid, a creature of myth made real. More often than not, this titan of the abyss recoils, vanishing into the ink-black pressures it calls home. A minke whale, by contrast, might approach, its vast, intelligent eye regarding the strange, bubble-streaming intruder with a profound and unnerving curiosity. Perhaps the first reaction of an ichthyosaur, that streamlined reptile of a lost age, would be much the same. A flicker of interest, not immediate aggression. But in a world of such colossal scales, even curiosity can be lethal. A gentle nudge from a creature the size of a bus is a catastrophic event. But other leviathans of the Jurassic operated on a different, more primal code. The great, their ecology, their very being, was dictated by a simple biological imperative. Any unfamiliar object in their water was to be investigated as potential prey. And for them, investigation had only one method: the test bite. For a 200-gram fish, this exploratory strike is a violent inconvenience. For a human being, it is instantaneous, obliterating death. This staggering difference in scale leaves no room for negotiation, no chance for a peaceful encounter. To meet a Liopleurodon in its element would not be an introduction, it would be a conclusion. Yet, to fixate on the predator is to miss the more profound, more insidious threat, the environment itself. The sea has always been a realm alien to our kind, a place of crushing silence and three-dimensional vertigo. Even for a trained diver, disorientation is a constant and typical danger. In the murky water, the mind's compass begins to spin. With the sun obscured by clouds, or as twilight bleeds across the sky, the concepts of up and down dissolve into a terrifying ambiguity. The Jurassic Sea would have magnified this peril tenfold. This was not the crystalline blue of a tropical reef, but a primordial soup, a milky green twilight thick with a particulate haze of plankton. Visibility would have rarely extended beyond 10 meters. In this disorienting gloom, it would be terrifyingly easy to lose one's bearings, to swim deeper into the crushing pressure instead of towards the life-giving air. Panic, the great enemy of reason, would set in, and then the inevitable drowning. It is one of the most statistically significant causes of death in water, its mechanism as simple as it is brutal. After the first involuntary gulp of water, a reflex action, a laryngospasm slams the airway shut. This is the body's final, desperate act of self-preservation, a shield against the flood. But it is a temporary, fatal victory. Starved of oxygen, hypoxia begins its work. Consciousness fades, the spasm relaxes, and the water, patient and relentless, fills the lung. The salinity of the jur being hypertonic begins a cruel reversal inside the alveoli. It pulls vital fluid from the blood into the lungs, creating a drowning from within and without. The struggle is swift. But in that ancient, warm, life-saturated water, the rate at which a human would lose strength would be accelerated. The constant need for vigilance, the sheer energy required to move through that dense, living medium, would lead to exhaustion far sooner. Panic, a voracious consumer of oxygen, burns through reserves at a rate 10 times that of a body at rest. And should one, by some miracle, survive the predators, the pressure, and the panic, the long, slow ordeal of survival would begin. The irony is absolute. Adrift in a world of water, the most immediate threat becomes dehydration. Without a source of fresh water, a human body will fail in 3 days. To drink the sea is to hasten the end. The kidneys, struggling to expel the immense salt load, must use more water than was ingested, a ruinous biological deficit. The only hope would be rain, a fickle salvation that, depending on the season and location, might not come for weeks. Food would present another insurmountable challenge. To be lost in the Jurassic Sea is to understand true insignificance. It is to be an anomaly, a fleeting warmth in a world of cold, ancient imperatives. The true horror is not the jagged tooth or the crushing jaw, but the profound, unthinking indifference of an ecosystem not built for us. It is a world that does not hate, for it does not notice. And in that vast, silent indifference, the brief, frantic story of a human presence would find its inevitable, quiet end. To be cast adrift upon the waters of the Jurassic is to be plunged into a world of profound and primal hunger. The shimmering schools of fish, slivers of mercury in the turquoise depths, would prove an impossible prize for mere human hands. They are a mirage of sustenance, a fleeting promise that vanishes with a flick of a tail. The ghostly bells of heoretically be edible, the vast majority are toxic, their gelatinous pulse a warning of agony and death. Hope might flicker in the presence of more ancient forms of life. The ammonites and belemnites, distant relatives of the modern squid, populated these seas in their millions. They were, in principle, a source of protein, but this was a food source locked behind impenetrable defenses. To consume an ammonite would first require breaching its fortress of spiraled calcium, a task demanding tools and leverage far beyond the means of a desperate survivor. The belemnites, stripped of their hard internal shell, would seem a more accessible target, yet they were living torpedoes, masters of jet propulsion, capable of vanishing into the blue in an instant of ink and motion, leaving behind only the lingering ache of starvation. The instinct to survive would drive one to construct a vessel, to impose a fragile human order upon the chaos of the waves. A raft, a simple boat. The physics of buoyancy are timeless. But the very timber of this lost world, harvested from the alien conifers of a Jurassic continent, would be an unknown quantity. Its strength, its resistance to the ceaseless gnawing of the saltwater, would be a life or death gamble. And even if the craft held true, it would offer little protection. From the abyss below, the great plesiosaurs would watch. A creature of immense size and power was more than capable of investigating a strange object on the surface, its long neck a periscope of primordial curiosity that could, with a single effortless nudge, splinter a fragile raft into little more than kindling. There is a single, cold comfort in this catalog of terrors. The mosasaurs, those supreme marine predators that would later dominate the Cretaceous, had not yet appeared. Their reign of terror was still millions of years in the future. But this small mercy does little to alter the equation. The combination of threats, from the relentless sun above to the leviathans below, rendered survival in the open Jurassic Sea a challenge beyond the limits of human endurance. Where, then, could one find a fleeting moment of sanctuary? Paradoxically, the most exposed place might also have been the safest, the very surface of the water. A predator rising from the depths would see not a person, but a silhouette against the blinding disk of the sun. This dark, uncertain shape could trigger caution, a hesitation before the attack. In our own time, great white sharks often attack from below for this very reason, striking at a vulnerable silhouette they cannot fully identify. In the Jurassic, this same deadly logic would cut both ways, offering a sliver of protection born from misidentification. The lure of the shore, the promise of solid ground, would be an almost irresistible siren's call. The shallower coastal zones would, at least, restrict the movement of the largest predators. But the shallows were a false hope, a different kind of killing field. Here, in the liminal space between land and sea, the marine crocodiles held dominion. The seabed itself was a minefield of nature's cruelest designs, a treacherous terrain of needle-sharp urchins and the razor's edge of living coral. To walk here was to invite injury, and in this world, any open wound was a death sentence. The water itself was a hazard, filled with the burning caress of fire corals and the trailing veils of venomous medusae. And then there were the tides. The Jurassic moon, a silent accomplice, exerted a gravitational pull more powerful than our own. In some bays, the amplitude of the tide could reach a staggering 10, even 12 meters, a vertical wall of water rising and falling twice a day. As this immense volume of water moved, the currents it generated were not gentle flows, but hydraulic battering rams. Velocities of several meters per second could transform a placid channel into a raging torrent, powerful enough to sweep a person from the rocks and carry them out into the open sea, from which there would be no return. These tidal zones, with their labyrinthine lagoons and one-way channels, were inescapable traps. Let us imagine for a moment a single soul finding what appears to be a haven. A shallow lagoon on the coast of the Tethys Sea. The water is a deceptive warmth, a pleasant 28 degrees Celsius. The clarity is absolute. On the seafloor below, corals of alien form bloom, and the slow, chitinous clicks of ammonites grazing on algae echo in the stillness. It is a scene of profound prehistoric beauty, but it is not a sanctuary. It is a beautiful cage, whose bars are forged from the unyielding laws of a world not meant for us. Survival here is not a question of strength or wit, but of belonging. And in the Jurassic Sea, humanity is a species out of time, an anomaly destined only to be erased by the profound indifference of an age not its own. At first, there is only an illusion of peace. The water is a placid mirror, reflecting a sky untouched by human history. But then, the surface shatters. A head emerges, reptilian and ancient. It is Ichthyosaurus, a marine crocodile of the Jurassic period, a creature of some 4 meters in length. It holds its distance, a cautious predator appraising the unfamiliar. Its eyes, cold and dark, betray a calculating intelligence. To retreat is to invite the chase. The shore is a distant promise, 100 meters of open water away. But that distance is an eternity. The crocodile, built for this world, can surge through the water with a fluid power a human, struggling against the drag of the sea floor, could never hope to match. The decision is not whether to flee, but how to face the inevitable. Consider another scenario, far from the false security of any coastline. Here, in the vast, open expanse of the Panthalastic Ocean, the seabed lies kilometers below. The surface is a sheet of warm, serene glass beneath a Jurassic sun in a cloudless sky. There are no visible threats because the true dangers do not announce themselves. They ascend from the abyss. A formless shadow detaches itself from the deep, rising with unnerving slowness. It resolves into a living torpedo of muscle and bone, 10 meters long. This is Temnodontosaurus, an ichthyosaur, a master of this oceanic realm. It is here to evaluate the strange object bobbing on its ceiling. Its eyes, optical instruments the size of dinner plates, have been studying you long before you were ever aware of its gaze, discerning your shape, your movement, your vulnerability from the crushing darkness below. In the zones of upwelling, where cold, nutrient-rich currents boil towards the surface, clarity is a forgotten luxury. A bloom of plankton has stained the ocean a murky, greenish gloom. Visibility is a mere 2, perhaps 3 meters. In these soupy conditions, an attack is not an event you witness. It is a final, explosive sensation from a direction you cannot determine. It is precisely in these fertile zones that the concentration of predators reaches its peak, drawn by the unparalleled concentration of prey. For a human, this would be the most lethal environment of all, a world of unpredictable encounters in opaque water, with not a single chance to see a threat before it strikes. As darkness falls, the very nature of the ocean transforms. A silent, vertical migration begins, as billions of organisms, plankton, fish, and squid, rise from the depths to feed near the surface. And with them come the hunters. Here, the water itself becomes an informant. Bioluminescent plankton, disturbed by any motion, ignite in a ghostly, bluish fire. A human in this water would be betrayed by their own existence. Every kick of the legs, every turn of the head, etching a phosphorescent outline against the black. It is difficult to conceive of a more perfect way to advertise one's presence to the night shift of Jurassic predators. Yet, the true lethality of these ancient waters might not have come from tooth and claw. The warmth of the sea, so inviting, accelerates life and death. Bacteria, alien and unknown to modern medicine, would thrive in these temperatures. Wounds would become infected with a speed that is terrifying to contemplate. For modern divers in tropical seas, a minor cut from a piece of coral can blossom into a serious infection within a single day. In a Jurassic sea, with its unique bacterial landscape, any breach in the skin, without the miracle of antibiotics, would be an invitation to a slow, agonizing demise. Even the water itself could be a poison. Certain dinoflagellates, single-celled algae, are known to produce powerful neurotoxins. In our own time, periodic blooms known as red tides can turn vast tracts of ocean into a toxic soup, killing fish by the thousands and posing a grave danger to humans. These organisms were diverse and abundant in the Jurassic. A single mouthful of contaminated water, or even prolonged contact with the skin, could lead to severe poisoning and paralysis. Add to this the phantoms of the sea, the ancestors of the cubozoa, the box jellyfish. Their lineage is venoms on the planet, drifted through these same currents. To be immersed in the Jurassic Sea is to understand a fundamental truth. It is a world of sublime, terrifying beauty, operating on principles that have no regard for human existence. Here we are not the masters of creation, nor even a significant part of the food chain. We are merely foreign matter, adrift in an ecosystem of profound and absolute indifference. In the warm, primordial waters of an ancient world, a danger lurks, as silent and diaphanous as the water itself. The venom of certain modern box jellyfish can extinguish a human life in a matter of minutes. Upon contact with their trailing tentacles, a cascade of microscopic spring-loaded harpoons, the nematocysts, injects a potent neurotoxin directly through the skin. In the tropical seas of our own time, these spectral hunters are numerous. In the warm, productive waters of the Jurassic Tethys Sea, it is a near certainty that similar venomous gelatinous organisms would have thrived in unimaginable numbers. This physical assault, however, is but the first wave. The second, and perhaps more lethal, attack is on the mind. Stress and the psychological state are decisive factors in any extreme survival scenario. Psychologists who study human behavior in the face of imminent drowning or predator attacks describe a chillingly consistent pattern. After the initial, violent surge of adrenaline, the instinct to fight or flee, a profound and paralyzing stupor often sets in. In the Jurassic Ocean, where threats would materialize from every direction in forms for which we possess no instinctive response, this psychological shock would be almost instantaneous. And in the water, paralysis is a death sentence. To understand this profound vulnerability, we must look back to the crucible of our own evolution. The human species was forged on the plains of the African savanna, and to a much lesser degree, along the coastlines of a far younger world. Our instinctive reactions to marine threats are partially tuned, but only to a modern ensemble of dangers. We fear the shadow of a great white shark, the lurking form of a crocodile, the crushing power of a rogue wave. But these are instincts calibrated for the threats of our own epoch. In the Jurassic Sea, this internal alarm system would fall silent. The vast, alien menagerie of predators would trigger no ancestral fear. Our instincts would offer no warning where it was most needed, and scream in terror at stimuli that posed no real threat. We are, in essence, a creature out of time, our biological software utterly incompatible with this ancient environment. Humanity's greatest strength is its unique capacity for cultural adaptation, a force that moves far faster than the slow grind of biological evolution. We pass knowledge and technology between generations, accumulating a library of survival. It is this trait that allowed us to conquer every environment on the planet. But all cultural adaptation requires a currency that is non-existent in this scenario: time. Time to learn, to invent, to communicate. For a single unprepared human plunged into this world, there is no time. They are a biologically naked primate, adrift in an ecosystem for which they are adapted neither by instinct nor by culture. The physical limitations are just as stark. A proficient human swimmer can achieve a speed of perhaps 4 to 5 kilometers per hour. This is roughly half the speed of a moderate run on land and a staggering 8 times slower than the attack velocity of the sea's apex predators. Endurance, too, is a fleeting resource. An expert swimmer might stay afloat for several hours, an ordinary person significantly less. The warm water would stave off hypothermia, but the constant effort to maintain coordination in a three-dimensional, ever-shifting medium would burn through energy reserves with brutal efficiency. Yet, the most overwhelming truth of the Jurassic Sea is its sheer, suffocating abundance. This was an ocean of impossible fecundity. Every cubic meter of water teemed with billions of organisms, a living broth stretching from bacteria to behemoths. The biomass was immense, and in such a system, nothing is ever wasted. The scent of blood or the chemical signature of stress in the water would be an immediate summons. The corpse of a large animal would be enveloped by hundreds, then thousands of scavengers within hours, a frantic explosion of consumption. For a human, this means that death is not the end. It is merely the moment one ceases to be an intruder, and instead becomes a resource, a fleeting contribution to a perfectly closed, ancient, and indifferent system of life. To enter the Jurassic Ocean is to become a signal, a disturbance in the pressure, a foreign scent on the currents, a silhouette unknown to this primordial world. A human presence here would not go unnoticed for long. It would be registered almost instantly, and by a multitude of beings at once. And yet, the supreme tragedy of this scenario is not the terror, but the beauty. This lost world of water would have been a place of breathtaking, lethal splendor. A crystalline clarity over reefs built not of coral, but of forgotten creatures. A living tapestry of strange, multi-hued organisms for which we have no names. By night, the waters would ignite with bioluminescence, a cold, ghostly fire stirred by the passage of unseen hunters. In the twilight depths, the titanic silhouettes of great reptiles would glide, masters of a kingdom that would endure for 100 million years. Swarms of ammonites, their spiral shells catching the filtered sunlight, would rise from the abyss in a hypnotic, coordinated ballet. To witness this would be the most profound spectacle of a lifetime, and it would be a death sentence. Here, sublime beauty and the promise of a swift end were one and the same. Any attempt to calibrate this peril against our own world fails. To speak of the most dangerous modern seas, the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, the coasts of Australia, is to compare a candle to a star. In our world, a human being has a chance. An encounter with a great predator is a statistical anomaly, an exception to the rule. Our oceans are not patrolled by the full, terrifying dynasty of the Mesozoic, the long-necked Plesioxygen we need. Our bodies are familiar with the P. The Jurassic Ocean represents a different order of danger. The distinction is qualitative, not quantitative. It is an environment so fundamentally alien that survival ceases to be a matter of skill or luck and becomes instead a biological impossibility. The only organisms that knew comfort in these waters were those born of them. Their bodies, their instincts, their very physiology, and the chemical composition of their cells were the product of millions of years of unbroken adaptation to this specific world. For them, this was not a realm of death. It was home, a warm, teeming, food-rich cradle of life. Our perception of it as a place of unrelenting horror is an artifact of our own fragile, terrestrial existence. It is the perspective of an intruder. We forget that this lethal world was a crucible for our own. We are its children, though it never knew us. The unfathomable tonnage of organic life that flourished and died in its depths, that sank into the silent sediment, was compressed by time and geology into the oil and natural gas that now fuel our civilization. The vast carbonate platforms, built by the lives of countless tiny creatures, became the limestone and marble from which we have raised our cities. The evolutionary lines that endured, the survivors of this and subsequent eras, gave rise to the fish, the turtles, the sharks that now populate our tables and our imaginations. We live upon a Jurassic foundation. But this foundation was never laid with us in mind. It was built according to rules that did not account for our presence. Evolution does not think ahead. It does not leave vacancies for future tenants. Every ecological niche was occupied. Every role in that intricate web of life was already cast. There was no space for humanity in the Jurassic Sea, because the very concept of humanity was an impossible anachronism, a creature from another planet's story. This mental excursion into a time long past is not, however, a futile exercise. It serves as a profound lesson in humility. It reveals how much of our modern comfort, including the relative safety of our own oceans, is owed to the sheer chance of cosmic and evolutionary history. The vast majority of the great marine predators, the true rulers of the Mesozoic seas, vanished from the Earth 66 million years ago, swept away with the dinosaurs in a planetary cataclysm. Our peace is an inheritance, bought by an extinction we never witnessed. The modern ocean feels safe to us not because it is tame, but because its true masters are gone, their ghosts sleeping in the stone and oil deep beneath our feet. Their extinction cleared the stage. The fall of the great marine reptiles was the silent prelude to a new dynasty, the cetaceans. The world of whales and dolphins, which now reigns, was born from the ghostly silence of their predecessors' demise. And the ocean we perceive as normal, a world where the great shark is the undisputed apex, not a creature relegated to a more modest niche, is but a recent chapter in a far older, more violent story. The end of the Jurassic was not a single, shattering blow, but a cascade of calamities, a series of crises unfolding on a planetary scale. It was a pattern of destruction and renewal. The mass extinction that closed the Triassic period had already wiped the slate clean, annihilating the rivals of the creatures that would come to define the Jurassic Age. But even within that period, stability was an illusion. The era was punctuated by repeated episodes of regional death, triggered by anoxic events that starved the seas of oxygen, and by the relentless rise and fall of the sea level itself. With each crisis, the very composition of life was rewritten. Faunas that had flourished for millions of years vanished in the geological blink of an eye, replaced by new opportunists. It was a world in constant, violent flux. A treacherous environment not only for its monstrous inhabitants, but for its fundamental instability. The very ground beneath the waves was impermanent. The Jurassic was an age of dramatic shifts in sea level. During periods of transgression, the oceans swelled, drowning vast continental plains and creating immense, shallow inland seas, teeming with new life. But then came the regressions. The waters would retreat, exposing entire continental shelves. Vibrant reef systems, sprawling cities of coral and sponge, would be left gasping in the open air, their intricate ecosystems collapsing into dust. For any marine community, these changes were apocalyptic. For a hypothetical traveler in time, they would render any map useless within a few thousand years, turning familiar coastlines into alien landscapes. Amidst this catalog of dangers, one aspect, often overlooked, offers a strange comfort. The background radiation of the Jurassic was fundamentally no different from our own. Cosmic rays, the silent particles that rained down from space, struck the surface with a familiar intensity, deflected by a greater, the water itself acting as a shield, absorbing the invisible barrage from the heavens. It is, perhaps, the only facet of the Jurassic Sea that would not pose a unique and terrifying threat. But this single mercy is drowned in an ocean of peril. The physical threats alone are overwhelming. An atmosphere thick with carbon dioxide, a subtle poison with every breath, a sun whose ultraviolet rays, unfiltered by a modern ozone layer, would burn exposed skin with agonizing speed. The water itself is a deception, a comfortable tropical warmth at the surface that gives way with shocking suddenness to a lethal abyssal cold. And with that cold comes the pressure, an invisible, crushing embrace that would mean instantaneous death. Then come the living things. The predators are a nightmarish tapestry of efficient killers. The toxins, secreted by seemingly innocuous life, are an ever-present and unpredictable danger. And the microbes, the unseen architects of disease, are a biological minefield, alien to our immune systems and potentially lethal in the long term. None of these threats exists in isolation. They are cumulative, a symphony of lethality. The very idea of a human exploring this realm has given rise to the concept of a paleoscuba, a hypothetical apparatus for survival. But what would it require? It would need an isolated, self-contained atmosphere with a modern air mixture. It would demand absolute protection from the temperature extremes and the deep's crushing grip. It would need an armored skin to fend off predators, a filtration system to neutralize unknown toxins, and its own independent source of fresh water. This is not the description of a suit for a diver. It is the blueprint for a deep-sea submersible. Any simple aqualung would be a death sentence. A submarine, a sealed capsule of our own world, is the only practical solution. The Jurassic Ocean guards its secrets, not with monsters alone, but with the very laws of its own physics and chemistry. To visit it is not to swim, but to be an outsider, forever separate from the world we came to see. To observe the Jurassic Ocean in safety, one might imagine a vessel of our own age, a submersible descending into the primordial depths. Behind its armored viewports, breathing the pressurized, familiar air of the modern world, an observer could witness this lost kingdom of beauty and terror without immediate risk. But this sense of security would be an illusion. Even the most advanced submarine would not guarantee absolute safety. A large plesiosaur, a true leviathan of the deep, is perfectly capable of delivering a blow with such percussive force that the integrity of a viewport or the seal around a propeller shaft would become a subject of sudden, critical doubt. The nature of the Jurassic Ocean had no provision for only participants. To truly comprehend this world, one's final thoughts must inevitably turn to the scale of time. 56 million years. It is a chasm of time so vast as to be almost meaningless. Our entire human civilization, with all its empires and technologies, is but a few thousand years old. The biological history of our species, Homo sapiens, a few 100,000. The Jurassic period alone lasted longer than the entire span of time that has passed since the emergence of the very first primates. For all those 56 million years, the Jurassic Ocean lived. It changed, it churned, it spawned, and it devoured life, all without us. Without our participation, without our necessity. And in this lies the most profound and unsettling realization of all. We are not needed in the Jurassic Ocean. Not because we are weak or foolish, humanity is clever enough and strong enough for many challenges, but because the Jurassic Ocean is a system that operated on a completely different set of rules, long before we existed, and it would have continued to operate with the same flawless indifference long after any intervention we might. In this ancient world, we are an alien element. We are not its masters, not its explorers, not even its prey in any meaningful sense. We are simply a random organic object, an anomaly the environment would swiftly and dispassionately recycle. This is precisely why the study of paleoceanography is so vital. It is not for the thrill of grim thought experiments, but for the profound understanding of the very system of which we are now a part. Our modern ocean is the direct heir of the Jurassic. Its chemistry, its physics, its fundamental ecosystemic principles, all of it has roots reaching deep into the Mesozoic and beyond. By understanding this past, we gain a far clearer vision of our present and can more accurately predict our future. The great challenges of our time, the changing climate, the acidification of the seas, the catastrophic loss of biodiversity, all have analogues recorded in the geological history of our planet. The stone and sediment are a grand library, and its chronicles tell us that the warming of the ocean is no abstract threat. During the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, it was a palpable reality. It altered the chemistry of the water, the composition of the fauna, and the level of the sea just as surely as it does today. The only difference is the velocity of the change. Then, these transformations unfolded over hundreds of thousands of years. Now, they are occurring in the span of decades. The Jurassic Ocean provides us with a concrete, terrifying example of what our world can become under conditions of significantly higher carbon dioxide and elevated temperatures. It is a frightening but necessary knowledge. In recent decades, paleontology has achieved a revolution in our understanding of these Jurassic seas. New technologies allow us to analyze the isotopes trapped in ancient shells, unlocking the very chemistry of the water they lived in. Synchrotron tomography illuminates the most delicate internal structures of fossils, revealing the echoes of behavior locked in bone. Molecular phylogenetics traces the lines of descent through deep time. These tools allow us to reconstruct not only the anatomy of these ancient creatures, but their physiology, their behavior, and the intricate, vanished tapestry of their ecological interaction. We are learning to read the planet's oldest stories, and they are teaching us about the system that sustains us. This journey into the deep past is not an escape from the present, but a confrontation with its deepest truths. It is a humbling reminder that the laws of this world were written long before our arrival, and that we are not the authors of this planetary story, but merely the latest and perhaps the most fleeting of its characters. The Jurassic Ocean emerges from the fog of prehistory, no longer a mere abstraction, but a world of staggering detail. It is a realm we can now map with astonishing precision, yet one whose soul remains forever elusive. For all the triumphs of science, for every fossilized bone that finds its place in the grand mosaic, there is an ocean of the unknown. The soft-bodied organisms, the true architects of the seafloor, have vanished with scarcely a trace. Behavior, the intricate dance of life and death, cannot be petrified in stone. The scent of the air, the true color of a predator's eye, the low-frequency call of a leviathan echoing through the abyss, all are lost to an irrevocable silence. We can assemble the skeleton of a plesiosaur, bone by perfect bone, with millimeter accuracy, but we cannot know the nature of its heart. Did it hunt alone in the crushing dark, a solitary phantom? Or did it move in coordinated packs, a family bound by instincts we can only imagine? These gaps are not a failure of our inquiry. They are an honest testament to the profound limitations of any science that seeks to resurrect the past. And yet, a breathtaking picture takes shape. This was no primordial chaos. The Jurassic Sea was an intricate, functioning system of immense complexity. It possessed its own unforgiving logic, its own brutal beauty, a symphony of survival played out across millions of square kilometers, maintaining a delicate equilibrium between the hunter and the hunted, between the microscopic producers of organic matter and the colossal consumers. It was a balance perpetually tested by catastrophe, a living system that was wounded time and again, but always it healed. If we could be granted a single, impossible moment, one heartbeat suspended in that time, what would we witness? Perhaps it would be this: a dazzling, almost violent blue water, shimmering beneath a sun both familiar and alien, its light holding a subtly different quality. The surface, a placid mirror, is suddenly shattered by the explosive breach of some immense, unseen creature below. High above, the leathery wings of a pterosaur carve a silent arc against the clouds. The air itself is thick with the tang of salt and ancient decay, an aroma of iodine and life that is at once recognizable and profoundly strange. And then, the silence. A deep, primordial quiet, punctuated only by the lap of water against ancient shores and a distant, guttural cry, a sound whose origin is lost to the depths. A single second in this lost world would speak more than a library of text. This ocean is a profound lesson in humility. It is a mirror reflecting not a monster, but our own transience. This earth does not belong to us. We are but the latest tenants in a house of unimaginable age, a home that has seen countless masters. The trilobites who owned the deeps, the ammonites who spiraled through millennia, the ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs who claimed the throne, they were all the norm for their time. And then they became history. We are not the exception to this rule. Our oceans, our air, our climate, they are but a temporary state of a system that has remade itself hundreds of times and will do so again. And should we, in our modern fragility, find ourselves submerged in these waters, the illusion of mastery would dissolve in moments. The very chemistry of this ancient sea would turn against us. Salt water, a merciless solvent, would strip the protective lipid layer from our skin far faster than any ocean we know. After only a few hours in the warm Jurassic Sea, the process of maceration would begin, a grotesque softening, a swelling and loosening of the epidermis. Our primary defense would become a porous, failing barrier, an open invitation to the teeming microbial life of a bygone age. It is a simple, brutal matter of physics, of osmotic pressure, the relentless drive of a hypersaline world to reclaim the freshness of our cells. Beneath the surface of a Jurassic Sea, an invisible assault begins. It is not the work of a predator, but a fundamental law of physics, an attack waged on the cellular level. The water itself is the adversary. Its salt concentration is a hostile force to a creature of the land, a relentless osmotic pull that seeks equilibrium. For any human cast adrift in this primordial ocean, this means a slow, inexorable drain of life. Water is drawn continuously from the body's tissues, passing through the skin and mucous membranes into the surrounding brine. The specialized organs that allow fish to combat this, to drink the sea and excrete the salt, are absent in our own biology. We possess no such defense. Immersion here leads to a creeping dehydration, a paradox where one is surrounded by water yet dying of thirst, a process made all the more insidious by the complete absence of the sensation itself. This silent threat, is but one element of an environment utterly alien to our senses. To imagine this world is to imagine its smells, an olfactory tapestry woven from processes of immense scale. Along the teeming coastlines, the decomposition of unfathomable masses of organic matter, the fallen, the hunted, the expired, would release a pungent, unfamiliar miasma into the tropical heat. Blooms of cyanobacteria, ancient and sometimes toxic, would taint the water with a peculiar, earthy musk. From the deep, anoxic zones where oxygen could not reach, plumes of hydrogen cellophane complex bouquet, a fusion of organic decay, marine iodine, and the humid breath of a warmer world, would create an atmosphere with no modern counterpart, a scent signature of a lost planet. And in these waters, a profound and unsettling silence would reign where we expect life. The familiar clicks and whistles of dolphins, the haunting songs of whales, the barking of seals, these sounds would be entirely absent. The great marine mammals had not yet been conceived by evolution. During this period, their distant ancestor ocean millions of years away. The ecological roles of the great cetaceans, the niches for colossal filter feeders and intelligent pack hunters, were not empty. Nature abhors a vacuum. They were filled by other sovereigns, the dolphin-shaped ichthyosaurs, air-breathing reptiles of terrifying speed, and immense predatory fish. It is a stark reminder that the script of life, the roles of hunter, grazer, scavenger, exists independently of its cast. Evolution simply fills these roles with whichever actors are available on its stage at that moment. For a human mind, conditioned to see the ocean as the realm of the whale and the dolphin, their complete non-existence would be a source of deep psychological disorientation. What then of our own place in this ecosystem? A lone human, a brief castaway in time, would make no impact. They would be an anomaly, a fleeting opportunity. The food chain, ancient and brutally efficient, would absorb this strange new arrival with chilling indifference. Any artifact brought along, scraps of fabric, tools of metal, fragments of plastic, would be sampled, consumed, or simply buried in the accumulating sediment, a minor impurity in the geological record. The trace left by a human would be no greater than that of any other animal of corresponding mass. It is an ultimate lesson in humility, a confrontation with a scale of nature so vast that the existence of a single thinking being is rendered utterly insignificant, a momentary disturbance in the water that quickly settles to calm. The grandeur of this world, its towering reptiles and colossal squid, all rested upon a foundation we would not even see. The popular image of a marine food web begins with sun-feeding phytoplankton, but the Jurassic Sea had deeper, darker engines. In the abyssal depths, where sunlight has never reached, chemosynthetic bacteria thrived around hydrothermal vents, metabolizing sulfur and minerals gushing from the planet's core. In the thick layers of silt, other bacteria worked tirelessly, decomposing the endless rain of organic detritus from above. These were the true producers, the invisible bedrock of the entire ecosystem. Without this microbial engine churning in the dark and the mud, the entire magnificent superstructure, the ammonites with their ornate shells, the long-necked plesiosaurs, the winged pterosaurs that preyed upon the sea's surface, could not exist. They are the forgotten architects of this lost world. And even this seemingly stable kingdom was in a state of constant, simmering change. Some evidence suggests that in the warm seas of the late Jurassic, the first ancestors of sea snakes were beginning to emerge, new forms testing the waters. The world was not static. It was a churning cauldron of evolutionary experiment, where dynasties rose and fell not over centuries, but over epochs. To look upon it is to understand that every ecosystem, no matter how complete or permanent it seems, is but a fleeting arrangement, a temporary solution to the endless question of survival. In the tangled labyrinths of coastal vegetation, a new form of hunter may have been taking shape. The hypothesis speaks of long, sinuous reptiles, their bodies perfectly engineered for hunting fish amidst the submerged roots and fronds. While the fossil record remains frustratingly silent, the the biological logic is sound. The warm, shallow seas of the Jurassic, teeming with life, would have provided the perfect crucible for the evolution of such serpentine predators. If they existed, these creatures would have added yet another element of sudden, terrifying violence to the coastal ecosystem, an ambush from the shadows, a flash of scales in the murky water. Above this world of constant peril, a silent observer dictated a rhythm of its own. The ancient moon exerted a gravitational pull as profound then as it is today, and its cycles were the metronome for life and death in the sea. Under the light of a full moon, tides surged higher, and a primal, irresistible signal was sent through the water. For countless marine organisms, this was the moment of propagation. In the great coral systems, a synchronized spawning would commence, an event of unimaginable scale. Thousands upon thousands of individuals would simultaneously release their eggs and sperm, transforming the clear ocean into vast, spectral clouds of life's potential, milky white plumes visible for miles. Such an ephemeral banquet did not go unnoticed. This sudden, massive infusion of protein into the water column was a summons, drawing in predators from every depth. A feeding frenzy would erupt, a chaotic spectacle of consumption. To be adrift in these waters at such a moment would be to find oneself at the epicenter of a concentration of carnivores that the modern mind can scarcely comprehend. This cyclical violence belied the illusion of stability in the Jurassic ecosystems. Beneath the surface of an apparent primordial calm, a relentless, silent war was being waged, a perpetual arms race between hunter and hunted. We see the evidence etched in stone. The spiral shell of an ammonite, a masterpiece of natural geometry, is found marred by the unmistakable signature of an attack. The serrated score marks of a plesiosaur's teeth, a testament to a countless number of ancient hunts, not all of them successful for the predator. Evolution was the ever-present arbiter, accelerating or retarding the race with every shift in the environment. Defenses were forged in the crucible of fear, thickened shells, defensive spines, the chemistry of poison, the strategy of burrowing into the silt, the sheer velocity of escape. These were not static traits, but living, desperate answers to the ceaseless pressure of being hunted. The very geography of the planet was a force of change. The slow fracturing of the supercontinent Pangaea created new coastlines and isolated seas, some of which became geological prisons with limited water exchange. In these basins, the fundamental chemistry of the ocean could be pushed to extremes. Hypersaline lagoons, shimmering under a punishing sun, saw their waters evaporate, leaving behind a brine hostile to most life. Elsewhere, at the mouths of colossal rivers, semi-freshwater zones created brackish deltas. Each of these environmental extremes became a niche, giving rise to highly specialized inhabitants. For any visitor from another time, they would represent yet another dimension of physiological assault, a stress on the body beyond the threat of tooth and claw. Even time itself flowed differently. The gravitational dance between the Earth and its moon was slowly, inexorably breaking our planet's rotation. A Jurassic day was shorter than our own, lasting only about 22 to 23 hours. This meant a quicker cycle of light and dark, subtly altering the diurnal rhythms of every living thing. For a hypothetical human observer, the difference would be subjectively small at first, almost unnoticeable. But over days, their own circadian rhythms would fall into a slow, creeping dissonance with the world around them, adding a chronic weariness to their catalog of hardships. And through this alien world, great journeys were undertaken. A chemical diary locked within the fossilized teeth of ichthyosaurs reveals that certain species were not bound to one region. Isotopic analysis shows they undertook vast migrations, traversing the oceans on a scale comparable to the great whales of today. They were not static monsters of a single sea, but strangely familiar and fundamentally different from our own. The fossil record, then, is not a complete story. It is a collection of fragmented clues, whispers from a world of unimaginable dynamism. Each bone, each tooth, Each track in the stone is but a single frame from a film of immense complexity, a world governed by forces both cosmic and microscopic. To look upon these remains is to see not a static past, but the faint echo of a living, breathing, and deeply violent world. They moved between summer feeding grounds in the frigid polar waters and winter spawning sanctuaries in the sun-drenched tropics. These were migrations of an almost unimaginable scale, epic journeys that spanned thousands of kilometers of open, featureless ocean. The image of a solitary, giant reptile, a lone leviathan charting a course through the immense desolation of the Panthalassa Ocean, is a vision that rivals the grandeur of any modern whale migration. In these ancient seaways, a human being would have been an irrelevance, a fleeting, insignificant detail lost within a landscape of colossal proportions. The sheer diversity of life in the Jurassic Ocean was staggering, far exceeding that of our own time. It was a world of profound purity, untouched by the maladies of a later age. There were no slicks of crude oil to poison the surface, no clouds of heavy metals settling into the deep. The coral reefs, vibrant and sprawling, knew nothing of the acidic bleaching that would one day plague their descendants. The concept of overfishing was an impossibility. Here, the biomass of large animals was incomparably greater. The megafauna of the Jurassic seas was not a small, curated list of survivors. It included dozens upon dozens of distinct species exceeding 5 meters in length, whereas today, we can count such creatures on one hand. The waters were not merely inhabited, they were saturated with life, a dense, teeming, intricate web of interactions, many of which we can now scarcely comprehend. But beneath the visible chaos lay another dimension entirely, an ocean of information written in a language of pure chemistry. The chemical signals coursing through the Jurassic Sea were infinitely more complex and varied than those in our modern, muted waters. Every creature released its own unique signature, a constant broadcast of its presence, its health, its intentions. There were the pheromones of spawning, drawing mates across vast distances. There were the alarm signals of a wounded fish, a sharp, acrid warning that rippled through the shoals, telling them to flee. All of this chemical data dissolved and dispersed, creating an invisible, yet profoundly rich, informational tapestry. The fish and the great marine reptiles were fluent in this language. They could read the subtle shifts in the chemical background, using it to navigate, to hunt, to hide. To a human observer, this vibrant, data-rich world would be utterly silent, completely invisible. We would be blind and deaf to the most important conversations happening all around us. This was a world locked in a perpetual arms race, a relentless, silent ballet of evolution. Many organisms possess defensive mechanisms of which we have only the faintest fossilized clues. Certain species of ammonite, it seems, could deploy a defensive screen, releasing a billowing cloud of ink ironment would disorient a predator, a moment of confusion that was the difference between life and death. Other invertebrates brewed toxic secretions in their flesh, a lethal deterrent to the unwary. Still others were masters of disguise, their skin capable of mimicking the texture and color of rock or coral with perfect fidelity. Attack and defense, deception and detection, these were the forces that sculpted every living thing. Every dawn in the Jurassic Ocean was a renewal of ancient cycles. As the first rays of a distant sun pierced the surface, the great vertical migration began. Legions of nocturnal creatures, having spent the night feeding in the plankton-rich upper layers, descended into the crushing, protective darkness of the deep. The phytoplankton, the foundation of this entire world, began their daily work of photosynthesis, breathing oxygen into the water. The rhythm of the tides dictated the movements of all coastal life, a colossal planetary clockwork, ticking to a rhythm set down across eons. The sun's heat would warm the surface, creating the daily thermocline, a shimmering barrier between two worlds. The great predators, their night's hunting done, would glide down into the cool abyss to rest. This was a self-sufficient, self-organizing system of staggering complexity. It required no external management, no guiding hand. It simply was. We often look back on the deep past with a sense of profound nostalgia, a longing for a pristine world that existed before us. But the Jurassic Ocean serves as a powerful corrective to this romantic impulse. It was, without question, a magnificent world, a world of terrifying beauty and unparalleled vitality. But it was not a world for us. It was a world that had no need of us at all. This was a world never meant for our bodies, nor our minds, nor our delicate sensibilities. Its beauty was alien, its order primordial. Life glittered here, but with the cold, indifferent brilliance of a system that had no concern for us. It was a planet that belonged to itself. To acknowledge this is not to grieve, but to take a step toward an honest understanding of our place in the epic of life on Earth. The Jurassic Ocean existed long before us, and it vanished long before we arrived. It bequeathed to us a profound inheritance: the hydrocarbons buried deep beneath our cities, the very limestone that forms our walls, the oxygen in every breath we take, and the ancient genes encoded within our cells, passed down through a vast, unbroken chain of evolutionary transformation. We are its descendants, in the broadest sense. Our molecules have cycled through its waters. Our most distant ancestors walked its shores. Our entire evolutionary trajectory was shaped by its history. And yet, it remains utterly foreign, a depth in which we could not survive, yet one without which we would never have. Every single cubic centimeter of water in the oceans of today carries a molecular echo of those Jurassic seas. The calcium in the shells of modern mollusks once passed through the spiraled bodies of ammonites. The carbon that builds the fish of our time was once the living tissue of Jurassic phytoplankton. The atoms have scattered, but the story remains, written in isotopic ratios, in the structure of minerals, and in the sequences of our own DNA. We cannot physically return, but each time we touch the sea, we are not discovering a new world. We are simply entering the next chapter of a single, continuous story, one that began hundreds of millions of years before we ever existed.